Hello, and welcome to Everything Becomes Something, the show where we explore the idea of circularity in nature, design, and human life. For the past 200 years, we have built our world around a take, make, throw away, repeat model. Meanwhile, nature has been running a masterclass in efficiency right outside our window. Because in nature, there is no away, just endless, elegant loops where death feeds life, where problems become solutions, and where everything always becomes something else. Some people are finally catching up. They're beginning to see that circles are more intelligent, more resilient, more beautiful than straight lines. I'm your host, Caroline Wood, and this is a space to learn from researchers, designers, engineers, biologists, artists, builders, and of course, nature herself, to understand how to build in ways that circulate, regenerate, and transform. Once you start seeing in circles, you really can't unsee them. Once you see in circles, you can't go back to straight lines. And once you understand that everything is connected to everything else, the linear world starts to look primitive. It changes what you build, it changes how you build, it might even change who you become. Welcome to Everything Becomes Something. In our first episode, we are going to be taking a look at a fascinating company called Piñatex, which is not fictitious. It really is something that exists, where a leather alternative is made from pineapple leaves, like the green leaves from pineapples. Um, it sounds kind of like something that a child would imagine. If you set a child an exercise to dream up some kind of fantastical innovation, then making leather from pineapple leaves could be something that you would expect an 8-year-old to come up with. But the brilliance of this is that leap of imagination and childlike thinking has actually been combined with adult practicalities and expertise and knowledge to bring this thing to reality. Um, I think the reason that I've selected this as my first deep dive is, well, the long story is I started researching circularity. I started looking into fashion because it's an area where sustainability and circularity is so needed because um, fashion really is one of the biggest culprits for consuming resources and then just landfilling them. It's one of these things that we love, like we love fashion. It's part of the human experience to dress up and express ourselves. It's amazing. Um, but it can be somewhat frivolous. You can think if we're really going to take resources, use them, and then just landfill them, doing that for fashion items seems very frivolous versus, I don't know, like buildings where people need to live and maybe more like fundamental products and services. Um, so there's a lot of work to do in fashion. I started looking into some of the emerging options in the fashion space. Um, ended up zoning in onto leather alternatives. Interestingly, leather is only really a small fraction of um, of the fashion market. Like if we really want to look at fashion and where the biggest kind of culprits are, it's polyester by a long way. I think about 60% of emissions come from, sorry, 60% of um, fashion textiles are polyester, and then distant runner-up to that is cotton at around 20%. So leather is only making up a small share, but it's still got some problematic, and it, it's an amazing material, but it's still got some problematic aspects to it. Um, it does come from cows. Cows take a lot of resources and energy to rear and also emit greenhouse gases in the form of methane when they're growing, by living. And some people may question the ethics of rearing cows to use in this way. There's a big conversation and debate that no one really agrees on as to whether leather from cow's skin is merely a byproduct of the meat industry, so it would otherwise go to waste, and therefore we're just, you making full use of something, versus another way of looking at this is, I think the leather, the skin, selling the skin of cows can make up to 25% of a slaughterhouse's profits. So it's not just this waste product, it's got real commercial value attached to it. So there's some like complicated questions around the kind of how much impact can really be attributed to the leather itself. Then further down the chain, but then as the leather is processed from the cow skin into leather that we can use, undergoes a tanning process. This is very water intensive, which is something else we need to think about in terms of environmental impact and resource use. Water is not an infinite resource. Fresh water is not an infinite resource yet. And then heavy metals are used, so there's some kind of toxicity involved in the tanning process as well, using heavy metals. And then, of course, once the leather is created, it's very, very durable, which makes it an amazing material. But it's not biodegradable, so that then gets landfilled at the end of its life. So the other point to note is that though I started looking at this from the lens of fashion, leather is of course used in other ways, used a lot in car interiors, furniture, other kind of like upholstery and interiors. So there is a bigger market than just fashion for having some kind of leather alternative. So all that to say, creating some kind of leather alternative is not going to be kind of transformative in itself on the environmental impact of leather and fashion overall. But we need transformation across every single product and service pretty much in every single industry. So it's one worthwhile material to look into alternatives for. There's a kind of, I don't know if it's booming, but there's definitely a market that is emerging for leather alternatives. And there's a number of kids on the scene these days. There's some people that are growing mycelium from mushrooms that has this kind of fibrous texture, which can be used as a leather-like material. Some people are attacking it kind of, I want to say more scientifically, but using more advanced technologies to kind of grow collagen, which is the material that skin is, like the building block material that skin is made of. And it needs kind of growing in the right way with the specific correct structure to really behave like leather. So some people are trying to kind of grow this from scratch using fermentation methods, or you could even just kind of take a sample of animal cells um, and then grow those cells directly. So this is another route. And then there is this world of using um, plant-based materials, aside from the mycelium, other plant-based materials to create leather-like materials. One, which is surprising, but you can make leather-like material from apple skin. Another one that sounds very exotic is making leather-like material from cacti. But one that really caught my eye and has really caught the media attention, and actually was one of the pioneers of this whole new space, is a company called Ananas Anam, where they made a leather alternative material called Piñatex, made from pineapple leaves. Um, and today I'm going to tell the story of Piñatex. I have to say, so yeah, today I'm going to tell you the story of Piñatex. I think Piñatex is especially captivating for a few reasons. First, it was really truly a pioneer material. Um, my understanding is that when Piñatex came on the scene, the idea of making leather from plant and commercializing this was kind of seen as a bit wacko. Um, so it was truly innovative. This is like one reason. Two, obviously, pineapples are very memorable and exciting. You get this like visual of a pineapple in your head when you think about it. So it's very like sticky for that reason. Um, Three, in terms of being circular as as a business and as a product, it hits so many of the marks. And I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail in a second. And then lastly, it was birthed from like an incredible lady who's a true designer, pioneer, innovator. Um, she's mesmerizing. The work that she's done is incredible. And she's just the kind of person who is just so well suited to bulldozing down expectations and having that combination of imagination and creativity, um, design taste, and um, doggedness that is needed to actually like bring something to reality. So I'm going to talk about a bit about her story as well. Um, but first, this whole show is to explore the idea of circularity and how we can begin to make more products in a way that is um, more efficient and more regenerative and keeps more of our valuable resources in circulation and at their maximum value and utility for as long as possible. The beautiful thing about Piñatex is that it uses the leaves of pineapples that would otherwise just be discarded and burnt. So this is truly an actual waste. We're growing pineapples to make pineapple juice and tin pineapple and pineapples that get sold in the shops. And normally they've got these huge leaves, actually. Like a pineapple that grows is not how you see them in the supermarket. They've got these like 1 meter plus leaves attached to them, which are normally just chopped off. Um, and burnt. And Carmen, um, the founder and pioneer of commercialized pineapple leaf leather, um, yeah, saw the opportunity to turn this literal waste into something valuable. Um, then another reason why it's very circular is um, instead of in its manufacturing process, instead of using heavy metal dyes, as is done in the leather industry, then it used resin-based coloring, which has minimal impact on the environment and no water either. So some of those other like resource uses that are not ideal with leather were mitigated through this process. The leather itself at the end, it did need to be mixed with some another material, PLA, which I think comes from corn, to make it durable enough to actually be used in bags and shoes and things like that, which meant that it's not biodegradable at the end of its life. So that part of the problem is not yet solved. It would still be landfilled in the same way as leather. But just looking at the upstream benefits of the process, then it's a huge leap towards more circularity. The other really wonderful thing about this is, aside from the environmental impact, then this created another revenue stream for pineapple. This created a new revenue stream for the pineapple farmers. Before they were just burning this, it was something that they had to dispose of, and then it got turned into an actual commercial product. And I heard Carmen explain that part of the fiber of the pineapple leaves is the part that has commercial value and that is like purchased from the the farmers. And then there's still a lot of biomass left over from the leaves, which they were then making sure to um, retain because it's full of nutrients and use as sort of like fertilizer that goes back into the soil. So really the whole system at that upstream level, um, everything is being used and extra value is being generated for the farmers. So it's such a beautiful story of how we can find this, how we could create systems that are better for the people and the planet together. The other part of this story that really needs touching upon to do justice to Piñatex and what it's done is Carmen's story. So she is from a small town or village, a small town in northern Spain originally, from a family of craftspeople. Um, and for a small town in Spain, her story into this really begins when she left Spain at age 19 to move to Dublin and noticed a lot of the leather products being sold in the markets in Dublin where she was living. And just thinking with the most pure entrepreneurial thought that can possibly exist, these products are okay, but they could be so much better. I could do something better. I could make something better. So her story actually began in classic leather by starting to make leather bags in a kind of smoother, sleeker form of leather than what was currently available on the Dublin markets at the time, and seemed to have a good design taste and a kind of knack for doing things well. And um, yeah, created a successful leather business. She cites that her products were being stocked in Harrods and some very big stores, and she then went on to become a consultant for companies who, again, in the leather space. So this was her kind of first love. She then describes some situations where she went abroad to South America and presumably Asia as well, and started to see the conditions under which the leather that was being made into the products that she was helping to design and create was made. And at this moment started to feel uncomfortable with the whole process. One of the things that I love about her attitude that comes through in her interviews is she sees the design through the whole through the lens of the whole system. And she describes how you can't just craft the end product and think about how do we get to this beautiful end product without thinking about the process that has gone into making that. And what she was seeing was these very beautiful, expensive products that are sold in luxury settings, but then seeing the reality of the people who are making these products sacrificing so much of themselves and their lives to make so little, um, and just thinking that this is not as good as it could be. You know, I don't want to say wrong. I think the spirit of entrepreneurship is always to just, like I said earlier, say, this is how things are today. It's serving a purpose, but can we do better? That's the human spirit, right? Is always just questioning, how do we do a little bit better? How do we do a little bit better? And that is what pushes things along. So we're at the point now where we need to start asking, how do we make things a little bit better? Which is exactly what Carmen did. Um, so she kind of set off on this quest, just slightly thinking in her head, I'm not sure I can work with leather anymore. What's an alternative? What's an alternative? I carried this question with her in her head for a while. And then um, at some point in the Philippines, discovered that um, using pineapple leaves to make fibers was an ancient technique that the people in the Philippines were already using. Um, they'd already sort of honed this craft and found value from it at a small scale. But juxtaposed against that, there were all of these like factories in the Philippines making these like cheap leather products to ship and sell. And the pieces started to fall into place. She was like, why you have this amazing history and tradition and kind of craft, yet you're just selling this, making and selling this kind of crap, really. There's an opportunity to do better here. So the leap really came from when she started looking at the pineapple leaf fiber, imagining what could be done with it, and started to see that the properties that it had could form a leather-like material. She then, again, the entrepreneur spirit just shining through, didn't just think, hey, this is a nice idea. Let's sit with it. She went out and she made that happen. She went back to school. Um, she did a BA and an MA, probably learning about textiles. She enrolled at the Royal College of Art in London, and I think spent 7 years, um, and spent several years truly investigating and learning how this material could be um, commercially scaled up into a leather. She did this in her 60s. Because she just had this like vision so strong of what it could be, and took this concept, this idea, into something that was sold to Hugo Boss, Chanel, Mango, Nike, and like other brands, like you can see this pineapple based leather on trainers and other products. And just I think captured the hearts and minds of so many people with this win-win story. Now, there is a closing chapter to all of this, which I'm afraid to say is not the kind of Disney style closing chapter where they live happily ever after. As I was researching this, then I was really getting so excited. I was like, reading up on all of this, and I was thinking, actually, I kind of was a bit skeptical when I heard pineapple leather. How big can this really get? Can this really work? But after looking into it, I was like, actually, this is really cool. And actually, there's a lot of discarded pineapple leaves. This could not take the whole of the leather market, but it could take a reasonable chunk of the leather market. And there is um, truly space for something like this. Um, but at the very end of my research process, and probably should have found this sooner, I saw that just a couple of months ago that Ananas Anam has actually gone filed for bankruptcy, super sadly, because um, the commercials were just not working. The amount of investment that they've pumped in the order of a few million, didn't match the turnover that they were making, which I think was just few hundred thousand dollars per year. Um, so this amazing story sort of becomes a cautionary tale. And from what I have read and understood from the information that's out there, the the issues that prevented this from really scaling up were a fewfold. One, these brands were open to trialing Piñatex in a kind of capsule collection as a bit of a like marketing stunt and kind of PR, like, oh, look, we're using this sustainable leather. But they did not then commit to really bringing this in as an everyday material, which was like part of their normal production lines, which is really the scale that is needed to get something off the ground. So people are kind of dipping their toes into sustainability because they want the brand image, but they're not yet committing to it at scale. One problem. Um, the other problem, I find this one crazy, but it was cited as a potential um, deterrent for brands wanting to use this, which is fashion companies wouldn't want to be seen um, influencing food prices. So if there were then this big demand for the pineapple leaves to make textiles, then that could potentially alter the price of pineapples and mess up the food chain. And there was some kind of trepidation or like cautiousness around wanting to have an impact there, which I find surprising, but was a cited reason. Um, yeah, another potential hypothesis as to what went slightly wrong here is although the um, pineapple leaf leather is a very kind of appealing, conceptually appealing product, the fiber from the pineapple leaves can actually be made into yarn, which makes things is kind of, I guess, like more like a cotton replacement. And that might have been a less sexy but a more viable material to sell into manufacturers rather than trying to work with brands directly. So, the leather was being made and then they were having these deals with Hugo Boss to kind of do a capsule collection. Whereas if they'd kind of maybe sold this in at the manufacturer level and really made this a kind of staple material in those manufacturing lines, perhaps the story could have been slightly different. So I feel like this got like 90% there. It's like bam, bam, bam. Ticks so many of the boxes as to like what we're looking for in great circular businesses. Um, but for a few unlucky reasons, has just fallen at the hurdle of getting this off the ground and turning it into a commercial success. Um, but I guess, that is where we're at today, and that is part of the excitement and the pain and the learning process, which many industries and companies and individuals are going to go through in this quest to move from a linear into a more circular economy. And in the spirit of the name of this show, Everything Becomes Something, I truly believe that there is no such thing as wasted effort. What Piñatex did was phenomenal and inspiring, and that will never be taken away from the world. It was really a pioneer that put into people's consciousness the idea that leather alternatives can exist. And I have no doubt that in a number of years, there are going to be leather-like materials made in completely different ways to how we're currently making it through cow skin. And the Piñatex is going to be one of the first dominoes that set that all into motion. So yeah, watch this space. I might do a few more episodes on some of the other leather alternatives because it's really interesting what's happening in the space. That's all today. Thank you for listening.